game.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
See dead people.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Here's Johnny.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie.
And Nikisha.
Where we share our love for spooky things and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Welcome, guys.
Welcome.
And today we are talking about the movie that best describes why you should not run away and join the circus. The 2021 American psychological thriller film Nightmare Alley.
You stole it, didn't you? Oh, I see an older man. Oh, the boy hates him. Oh, the boy would love to be loved, but he hates that man. Oh. Death. Death and the wish of death.
He loved that watch. That was his pride, my father.
Was it now? No, that's it. That's it. That's it.
Can we have some?
Yeah, I could throw some circus. I could throw some circus tunes in there.
Beautiful. And we have a lot to talk about in this one, but it is directed by one of our favorite directors, I would dare to say on this podcast. We favor his stuff, Guillermo del Toro. And this film was made from a screenplay by Del Toro and A1 Kim Morgan, based on the 1946 novel of the same name by William Lindsay Gresham. And it stars Bradley Cooper, Kate Blanchett, Toni Collette, Willem Dafoe, Richard Jenkins, Rooney Mara, Ron Perlman, and David Strathairn, to name a few. Now, before we get into all of this, obviously there's going to be heavy spoilers. We are going to be talking about everything Nightmare Alley. Any trigger warnings, Jamie, that we should warn the people about?
There is some murder, some alcohol abuse, some allusions to other physical abuse, more murder, some discussion of abortion, murder, suicide. Did I miss anything?
Did you say
murder?
Sexual abuse, innuendo, or mentioning?
I said like allusions to physical abuse, but all kinds of abuse are referenced.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, before we get into all of that, we need a plot summary of what's going on. I mean, it's a 2.5 hour long movie.
What's the plot?
I think the guide to do it is the random male noise that is Producer Brian.
Yay!
Okay.
Fantastical.
All right. All right. Yeah, who wants to time me?
I have my phone. Oh, you got it?
I can.
Okay.
Jamie's gonna do it. Yes.
I'm gonna do it. All right. Are you ready?
Ready, Freddie.
All right. It's Jamie, actually.
Sorry.
And go.
Okay, so we meet this guy named Stan who doesn't talk for 20 minutes at the beginning of this movie. However, he joins a circus. Basically, he is on a bus. He joins a circus. He meets all these funny folk. And one of them is David Strathairn, whose name is Pete in this movie, and Pete is a drunk, and Pete teaches him basically how to be a mentalist, all the tricks, all the trades to it. And in this circus, there's also, like, everyone has a different part. There's one part that's a geek. It's typically an alcoholic or an addict of some sort that they take advantage of, and they kind of make him do not so humane things to entertain the crowd. But it is an illegal practice. So they're always kind of being taken down by the police. When they are taken down by the police, he shows off his mentalist skills. He's spectacular at it. He's essentially a con man. We know that in his background, he has some father issues. We later find out that he hated his father, and he ended up killing his father through like cold weather. And then he burns down the place, and that's why he's escaping. But he meets Rooney Mara on the circus, and they go to the big city to live out their dreams, and he's headlining as a mentalist. He meets Kate Blanchett, who is a psychiatrist. I wasn't 100% sure. And essentially, he gets information about her clients, and he uses them to trick them mentally, like as a mentalist, to help them. And it ends up backfiring because he meets another patient who's a nut job. And then he has to end up he involves his wife. He has to end up killing the guy. And then he starts drinking. He doesn't drink the whole time. And then he starts drinking. And then essentially what happens is he becomes an alcoholic because he goes down this road. And then he looks for a job in the circus again. And this time he accepts the geek role. And so his life has come full circle down the drain into Nightmare Alley.
Good job. You had like 10 seconds left.
Work. Yes.
That's the plot.
Amazing work.
It will never not be funny.
It will never not be funny. So let's just get into it. Just some general things that you liked, observed about the movie. And I'll go first in just saying that even though this is a 2.5 hour long run time, there's a lot going on and not a lot going on. And I like that because I appreciate the fleshing out of characters in a movie to really get the depth and the stakes of the movie and the character. I'm mostly leaning towards Bradley Cooper, obviously, because there are other people where I might have wanted to see more. I couldn't actually tell you what I would want to see, but I enjoy his character arc. And I, of course, enjoy the cinematography. I love melding the old with the new, and this is considered, or at least what Wikipedia said, neo-noir in filming and cinematography. And I just appreciate that style of filming because it adds a little je ne sais quoi to the filming experience for the audience member, and you're not just watching a story and watching these actors be fabulous and amazing, which could be enough. But I just like that the added essence of having a little bit of pizzazz into the cinematography that puts you in certain moods, especially with the lighting and how some of the scene transitions are. And it just sets up some of the emotions that you're supposed to feel as an audience member. So that just brings you even more into the story as opposed to you just visually watching something. It just really brings in kind of the emotion for me. And so I enjoyed this. It kind of makes me want to read the book because I did not realize that it was from a book. Have you, any of you guys read the book?
No,
okay.
I can't read.
But you know what you can do? Talk horror. Fabulous. But that's all I have is things that I like. You guys? Either one?
I haven't watched like a lot of film noir. But I liked that element of it. Very old timey. Who doesn't like to jive with some old timiness now and then?
Jive with the old timey.
And yeah, like I really love like a lot of the actors in this, but to be totally honest, I don't know how much this was for me. Am I allowed to talk about what I didn't like? No? Okay, I didn't know if I could only talk about the things I liked right now.
Yes.
It felt really long, and I feel like you could have cut an hour out of this of like the carnival stuff. Like I didn't need to see all of the acts and all of that stuff. Like I think we could have gotten to him learning like some master what's it called? Montage of him like learning how to be a mentalist. And like cut out a lot of the other stuff and you know, still kind of come full circle about like learning what the geek is and having him end up there. It just felt really unnecessary. I also didn't understand Bradley Stan's relationship with Xena at all. Like it made no sense to me. There just didn't seem to be a point. Like it was clear that that Xena and Pete were already like, you know, taking Stan under their wing, but like why I just didn't understand. We didn't mention like the brief sex scene in this, but there is a brief sex scene. And yeah, I was just like, why is this happening? It just didn't make any sense to me. And then my main thing that was like even more confusing, and maybe I'm more harsh on this character because I'm a mental health professional, but like I just didn't understand the point of Lilith. I didn't understand like what was Caitlin, like what was the purpose of all of this? Why did she betray him? Why did she put him through all of that? She didn't need the money. It wasn't about the money. I was like, was she really that embarrassed at that first interaction that she like went through this whole thing to just betray him at the end? It really just didn't make any sense to me. And then the last thing, sorry, I realized I have more gripes than I thought, is I don't understand why he started drinking. I don't understand why Stan started drinking. In the beginning, they make it clear that like his father was an alcoholic and it obviously deeply impacted him. And he was like, I'm never going to touch booze. Then he accidentally, not so accidentally, murders someone related to booze. And so it's clear that he has an aversion to it. And then he's like, you know, uncomfortably drinking it in front of Cate Blanchett, maybe as like a, like we're shaking on it, we're both in this together kind of moment. But like what the alcohol that touches his lips and all of a sudden he's like, I need more. Like it just didn't make any sense to me. How I understand how alcoholism and substance abuse works. I don't understand like why he started drinking. It just doesn't make sense. So that's been gripes with Jamie. Like gripes, but
just to maybe give some type of explanation, and this is just solely me, and I'm probably reaching for the stars here. But for him to have alcohol, it seems as though what was happening is that because he has gained all of this power or believes that he has all of this power now, which was one of the main themes of, you know, this is too powerful for you. If you get into it, then you'll start believing the lies. And so maybe in a sense, he believed that he had the power to not succumb to alcoholism like his dad. And so with that, it was another kind of power play within himself to say, I have reached this level of not immortality, but in a sense that essence to where he now can say, well, I wasn't touching this stuff because I knew what it did to such and such person, but maybe because I've gained all of this knowledge and power and can control myself and control other people with his manipulations, that he can control himself and not fall into the alcoholism that he has seen throughout his life. That's the only explanation I can give for it. That's my answer. I'm sticking to it.
No, I appreciate it. But yeah, that was all the things that I had been like processing post watch.
Yes. And we'll definitely get into some more alcoholism as it pertains to the psychological standpoint. But Brian, do you have some likes or gripes? We should have that in this section. Likes and gripes.
Good. Likes and gripes.
Good stuff.
I liked this movie. I don't think it was perfect, but I agree with both of you. I think that it could have been a half hour shorter and still gotten the point across. However, I, like you, Nikisha, love the extra moments to establish tone and to really lay down thematic elements and give characters a little bit more of an inner life and layers by showing a little bit more of their journey towards the end. However, I do think that it could have been a half hour shorter in places and trimmed down in order to still achieve the desired effect. I also didn't buy into the fact that he just like all of a sudden became an alcoholic. However, I narratively understand why, like for the narrative, for the change in character, for all of that. I just didn't emotionally buy it, if that makes sense, in the context of the movie. I actually thought that Kate Blanchett was in a different movie than everybody else. I think that everybody was grounded noir, and she was like 1940s noir, if that makes sense. I feel like everybody was grounded in something realistic, whether it was the Ron Perlman character or the Willem Dafoe character, who like were very noir, very like campy in some ways, but also grounded in some sort of reality. Whether Ron Perlman like made a promise to her father to keep her safe, or whether Willem Dafoe says that line to him where he's like, we all have secrets or something like that. Like there's a very grounded, like, and even the Rooney Mara character, and the Bradley Cooper character, obviously. But I felt like she was kind of in this like different noir, like almost like a Sin City type of movie instead of this one. I don't think she was bad. She just felt out of place. And then what cemented that for me is I agree with Jamie. I didn't understand her motivation. And that's not to say Kate Blanchett didn't have one. I just think the movie didn't do a good job of narratively weaving it in. I also believe that a lot of her actions were based on the fact that he humiliated her in front of that group. And that's like not what she wants, who she is. I think it's insinuated that she was attacked by men potentially or something to that effect. Maybe she didn't like to have the power that he had over her in that room, humiliated her, whatever the case may be. Because also the common theme also in this movie is like potentially he was sexually abused. Rooney Mara makes that comment. What's her name? Molly.
Molly.
Rooney Mara makes that comment about how she's a virgin. Well, but she makes that comment about how but she's a virgin in terms of like consent. And so that was very upsetting. But I think there's also this like idea that, the idea of power and sexual power and just power in general over people, mental power. Because he's a mentalist over her, over the crowd, but also like Willem Dafoe was a mentalist over the geeks. You know what I mean? So it's kind of about like who's in power in that moment. I do love movies like this where there's no exposition. There's no verbal exposition. It's all told in character beats as well as flashbacks, because we don't find out his name is Stan until 20 minutes in when somebody else says his name. He never introduces himself. And I love that type of storytelling. But overall, I wasn't like inspired by this story. I like Guillermo del Toro's tone just in general, whether it's this or whether it's Shape of Water or the Hellboy movies or Pan's Labyrinth. Or the only one I haven't seen is Crimson Peak.
Oh yeah,
that's the one I haven't seen. I'm torn on this movie. I'm still absorbing it. I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I saw it on HBO Max. I thought the performances were really good in general. I think Rooney Mara was a little wasted in this, even though the last 20 minutes are very exciting, and I think she adds to that. And then again, power, them in the bathroom at the bus station, like him talking her down from that, like he's able to do all those things. There's an ego there, there's power. This movie is just about power dynamic, but I just didn't understand. My biggest flaw of this movie is not that alcohol as much, but I just didn't understand the Kate Blanchett dynamic. I didn't really understand what she was trying to do within this world.
Do you feel like it was because of the writing or her acting or both?
I think it was the writing. I don't think it was her performance. I think it was the writing. I just it was very vague. everything surrounding her was very vague, and we never got a moment of explanation. I don't necessarily need that in every movie. I know. I feel like the three of us are smart enough to read between the three of us are definitely smart enough to read between the lines. I just felt like there wasn't a lot to read between the lines, and I think that's a writing thing, and there weren't any character beats in there to even allow her to kind of like give us a wink, nudge, nudge into what she's actually doing.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I have definitely not an explanation for that.
Yeah.
And even you guys bringing it up, that was one of the things that I didn't even think about, but because there was no answer there. She just kind of fell in the background as just someone who was a villain who just quote unquote villain, who just added to the dramatics of the movie, but not necessarily like a character, what are you doing here type situation.
And on the flip side of that, if I may add, the Richard Jenkins character, when he just brings up that he like not in passing, but he's trying to get all of his sins out of his system so that he can see his girlfriend, his fiance, his wife, his mistress, whatever she was. And then he mentions that he hurts young girls and he hurts girls. That was interesting to me because we got a little insight into this horrendous character. I didn't need to know more about him in that way. His little insight there gave me enough about him. And we knew he was a monster. We knew something was off about this in a more like, not just like rich, obnoxious person way, but in like lack of a temper or lack of a filter on his temper. And then when he mentions that to him in the park or in his grounds, that's when like the tension starts to build with Bradley Cooper's character and with you as the audience member. So I didn't need any more information about that. I like that sprinkling in of something horrendous as opposed to Cate Blanchett. I feel like we just never got behind the surface.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of Cate Blanchett and her role as a psychiatrist, psychologist, who knows?
She's a psychologist.
Okay. I thought it said at some point it said psychiatrist on her card or something. I don't know. But either way, Jamie, questions about this, specifically the first therapy session that Stan has. And to me, it just seemed very invasive, the questions that she was asking. It seemed like she was trying to get something out of him and not in a let's heal and release way, but she had an ulterior motive that we all have decided we don't know what that is. But can you just give me your general thoughts about that session, if you had any? Also totally cool if you didn't.
It was super weird. I mean, it's really interesting because we've now watched a few movies of like the quote intake sessions of different therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists with nefarious intentions. I know Brian loves the word nefarious.
Spectacular word.
But yeah, this one was a little, I'm also like, why did he agree to this? She was like, I want you to like be honest with me. And then she's just like asking a whole bunch of things. And I guess like, no, this felt really unusual to me for a lot of the reasons that I think I said about Hypnotic is that like that first session typically I feel like is probably the most directive and action oriented when it comes to like info gathering. This was her using the same tools that I think he used as a con man. Like this was essentially her. I feel like they were just saying that she's like a con woman where she's able to read him and be like, oh, so like tell me about your relationship with your father and tell me about your mom. And oh, I noticed that you winced when I poured the alcohol. What was that about? And like, just like really gunning for it. And like, you know, it's obviously really confrontational. And I use that word because like, there are approaches where you can be confrontational with clients, but like it doesn't look like that. It's not like aggressive in its confrontation. It's like reflecting back what you're like hearing. So like you might say like, oh, I've noticed that like, you know, your body language sometimes changes when we talk about your job. Like, have you ever noticed that? And that's like confrontational, but not not aggressive of like, oh, like, do you hate your job? That's also, I mean, I don't know.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember exactly what she said, but there were moments where, I mean, definitely her tone was aggressive, but I feel like she was saying things that were really leading. And like, that's also not really, you know, I mean, there's spaces where you can ask like not open-ended questions to like, again, gather information and, you know, ask for clarity and things like that. But like, you shouldn't be like putting words in your client's mouth. Like that's not, that's not really like, it's not an experience for them. Then it's just about her. And she's like, she's not info gathering to help him. She's info gathering for herself. And like that, I think that is a big no-no when it comes to therapy. Like the tools that we're using, the questions that we're asking, it's not about us and like our curiosity. It's about like, is it serving the client for me to ask a question? Like, is this going to help the client have a better understanding of what's impacting them? Is this going to help the client have more insight into why they might be acting in this way? But once it becomes about like, you as the therapist, that's a problem. And like, it's very clear that she's just trying to gather this information on him, you know, so that she has ammo against him, you know, for her big reveal at the end. But that is all a big no-no.
A no-no in the psychology world. Don't do that.
Don't be doing that.
So this is just a random question for my own benefit, but the whole thing of when you see in movies and TVs of the patient going into the therapy session and lying down on the couch and spewing all of their feelings. So just the lying on the couch, is that a thing? Like, where did that come from? All of my therapy sessions have been via Zoom, even pre-pandemic. So I've never even sat inside of an office. I don't know what her office looks like. I don't know if there's a big, comfy, cozy chair, pull-out ottoman. I don't know. But what is it where did that come from? Because it's been in a lot of different movies and medial things. So can you kind of tell me what the heck is that?
Yeah.
Wait, before you start, let me lie down.
Oh yeah, get comfortable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like that's been in like cartoons and like it's like the very stereotypical like psychoanalysis thing. And I think like, I mean, I very much associate it with like psychoanalysis, which is a specific modality of therapy where it's like way more open-ended. Like this is also kind of like going back to like Freud and some of those like more old school like ways of thought. But like psychoanalysis is still done. And I think in terms of like the fainting couch type deal, I've never seen one of those in a therapy office, but most of the therapy offices that I have been in have some kind of couch, but like a normal, like a love seat, if you will, that you might have in your house. Nothing that's like, oh my word.
Right.
But I think that there's something to like the psychoanalysis process, which is not as action oriented and like is more deep and definitely, you know, historically has gone into like early childhood experiences and like process and like just kind of whatever's coming up, being able to talk through that, which like you kind of do see with Bradley Cooper. He's just kind of like saying a string of things. He mentions the name of the person that his mom had an affair with or left his father for. So like there's something about that experience that I think, you know, sometimes can stir up some thoughts and feelings in people that then like the therapist can help that person process. I think also like just something to the notion of like lying down in a therapy session for some people might offer a sense of comfort, a sense of like, you know, like dreaming, for example. There's a lot of like interest in like dreams and like the subconscious with psychoanalysis too. So I think like kind of simulating that type of like physical, like the physicality to lying down can potentially like maybe evoke some more of that in that space. But I think for the most part, it's like way more associated with like old school psychoanalysis. I really don't see a lot of folks still doing that unless it like looks really cute in their office, like a really nice leather chaise lounge.
Yes.
But like other than that, which like if anybody wants to, you know, get me that for my non-existent therapy office, I'm totally down. But yeah, I think it's just like, you know, to help get somebody comfortable while they're like accessing all of these parts in their brain in the therapeutic process.
Well, speaking of processing, there is kind of this underlining maybe golden rule of the mentalist as far as being able to probe their potential victims and their mark. Yes, thank you. all those words to say their mark. And Pete first says that
there was no one named Mark in this movie, I don't think. His name was Stan.
Oh, well, I was thinking of Wahlberg. You know, one of the Wahlbergs was in there.
Oh, yeah. You're Mark. All mentalist Marks are Mark Wahlberg. Oh, man. What an image. Oh, my God. I love that. Say hi to your mother for me.
Oh, God. Well, Pete in this says that there's always father trouble. And so then there's the whole thing of, there's always parental trouble. I think Cate Blanchett had a similar line in that as well. And I just want to ask, where does that come from? Why do you think that he was making that assumption? Because I know that also a trope that might have some factualness to it is that if there is some type of issue, you start with your parental situation. Not that they are the issue, but if you are doing maybe an intake or talking to your client as such that your parental figures will come up in some way. Whatever that leads to is whatever it leads to. But I guess my question is, do you believe that there is always some type of parental whatevers with people, or, you know, how do you feel about that statement in general, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's like, I think that they're trying to say that there's an easy assumption to saying that, like, you know, if you have some kind of issue, that it all goes back to the parent in the same way that that's like, it's so stereotypical, like the psychoanalysis on the lying down on the couch stuff. Like there's like all of that is all like very core to the themes in this is these kind like somewhat antiquated views of mental health, but like it does still resonate in a lot of ways because, like, you know, we've talked about generational trauma. We've talked about like how parents can influence their children, and like, you know, how could that not just like genetically and biologically in terms of mental health, but also just like experientially, and like that parenting, you know, like how people parent and attachment style, all of that. How does that influence, you know, who you grow up to be? So I think it's really, I think that when they talk about like identifying a mark and trying to figure out like what are the things that they can do or say that like resonate, and it's all just about like, if they can get one hook, then that's what they need. And I think they picked something that's like general enough that can apply to most people, but also like not like so specific that it would then box somebody out. And so I think that's what they're trying to say. And again, it's like, could you say that like maybe there was a point in your life that there could have been some kind of like disconnect or tension or conflict with your parents?
Mm-hmm.
Like I would say for a lot of people I know, for most people I know, yes, even for myself, for sure. So I think it's just easy. I think what they're saying is that it's easy to make an assumption that like somebody has some kind of parental baggage because like it's just so common in a variety of ways of what that actually looks like. So he just happened to be like super right. And again, like all the things from both that, but then also in the beginning with like Pete and talking about the watch and going through that process, it's like he really like nailed it in terms of what information he was able to narrow it down to, but also again, like, could that potentially apply to like a huge amount of people? I think so. So again, it's like, but like I think the other thing is like, as humans, we will always like view ourselves, like we are egocentric, like we view ourselves as like bigger than everyone else. And I don't mean this in like everyone's a narcissist, but like, I think we all have tendencies where like, you know, we are highlighting our own experiences because that's all we know, right? Like we only know our own lived experiences. So I think too, if somebody like I forget exactly how they say it, but they say something along the lines of like, you know, people just want this like certain type of experience. And I think that that's true in that like, we want to feel special. We want to feel unique. I think the idea that like someone's able to like, you know, give information that lands with some part of us. This is like, I'm not anti astrology by any means. I don't fully understand it, but like there have been moments where I'll read things and I'm like, wow, like this super lands with me. Like I'm a Cancer. So anytime anyone says like Cancers are emotional, I'm like, yeah, totally. But then I'll read other things for other people and I'm like, but this also kind of applies to me. Absolutely. So then I'm like, what do I make of this? And again, like I have a very barely basic understanding of astrology. So please don't come for me. But like, I think that there's something to like looking for seeking out information that feels like it resonates with me and like being so receptive to it and like, like holding on to it. And so like, I think that's part, and I think that's also part of what they're saying about like the types of people who are going to these events are people who like want to feel that. And so it's like going both ways of like, they're working with a crowd that is open enough where these techniques and tools like are super effective on them, like the judge, like he so badly wants this connection to find relief. And so like it lands for him because he wants it. He wants to believe it to be true. And so it's going to work. And so I think that that's why, you know, saying anything that's like close enough to us, whether it's like early childhood experiences with our parents, even if they're not great, we could be like, oh yeah, I was such a jerk to my mom in middle school. I was like the worst kid ever. And then be like, oh yeah, that's me. And so I think I think there's like all of these things that are at play that make it, that make folks like really susceptible to those types of comments.
Yeah. I think what they were saying was everybody wants to be seen. So that absolutely makes sense that any little thing you're going to say, oh, that is about me. Even if it's a small piece of me, that's something that you're resonating with. And that's a great explanation about just the ego and slight narcissism things. It's wonderful, wonderful things. Jamie's preaching up in here. But yeah.
But if someone wants to do like an astrology reading on me, I would find that very interesting and fascinating. So thank you. I want to know what I'm rising, moon, sun, like all of that.
Oh, absolutely. My dad randomly sent me my birth certificate. And what was the first thing I did was pop it into an astrology thing to see what my ascending and rising was. But as a fellow Cancer, yes, Jamie, somebody do a reading on this.
Wait, have you is it your birth time? Is that how you find that? Oh, but I know. Oh my God. So I can Google it right now. I know what my birth time is. Yes. Oh my God. I'm really excited to get this information.
Fantastic. I am going to let you do that and look it up because I'm curious to see what's yours. But this is a question for both of you guys. But Brian, you can answer this too. And this is just a random trying to figure out what this movie is or answer questions from the movie. But
Sure.
Are we to believe that Stan did say that he gave the poison to Pete, but in the therapy session, he said that he did it by accident. Are we believing this? Is this yes or no? Or do you think that he absolutely gave the poison to Pete on purpose so that he could take the book? He was already formulating plans anyway of taking Runa's character away and all that jazz. But how do you feel about that? I'm just curious to see what do you think?
I think that he did it. I don't think that I think the movie is super vague about it. I don't know if the movie is trying to be that vague or if they just didn't do a good job of setting up whether he did it or not. Because you have Willem Dafoe telling him like, this is the difference between the two. Like there are very specific differences. And then they set that up. And then he goes in there and he puts the money in and we don't see which side he takes it from. When he sees him dead on the ground, he kind of doesn't really have any reactions. He seems a little bit surprised. I don't know if he's acting that, if he's conning there. And then later on, he like kind of gives two answers. I personally believe that he absolutely did it on purpose. I think that if he didn't do it on purpose, they would have dealt a little bit with how he felt about the accident of doing it. I think it benefited him too much to not do that. You know what I mean? So that's what I think. I think that he actually did it. I don't know if the movie does a good job of pointing you in that direction, but then I don't think it does enough to point you in the other direction. And typically, if a movie doesn't push you one way or the other, it's probably the more sinful thing, if that makes sense.
That's an interesting concept. Yeah. What about you, Jamie?
Sorry, I missed the question because I've been calculating my signs.
Fantastic.
Very, very urgent.
It's an urgent
research
matter.
I'm doing over here.
No, I just wanted to know if you thought that Stan
if he did it on purpose.
On purpose, yeah.
I think he did it on purpose. I think that we already know that he's killed before. And I think that I think that he is a not good guy that tries to pass as a like naive person. Like I think that he like acts like he's naive, but is not actually naive. And yeah, I think he did it.
Beauty. Well, my last question for you, Jamie, as I know we have important matters to figure out right now with this astrology. But on the subject of alcohol, can you just describe to us what
my favorite beverage is?
Right. So you guys can send it to us, please. But how can substance abuse, any kind of substance abuse, of course, this one is mostly talking about alcohol in this movie, but how can that be addressed from a psychological standpoint? Just in general, I mean, obviously there's meetings and things, but how would you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the meetings is definitely a part of it in terms of like a support system, especially because, they talk a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous about like people, places, and things, I think is like part of it. And so like, avoiding the people that maybe you're more likely to drink or use substances around as a way to work through it. And then like having a system of people who like also have shared empathy and compassion for one another because they're all going through it together and they know what it's like. I think, an effective therapy approach with substance use is this approach called motivational interviewing, where it's about shifting people's thoughts into a state of ambivalence around their behavior. And so, there's like core tenets of it, which includes like being empathetic, developing discrepancy of like, you know, the things that people are doing now versus how they want their future to look. Not arguing with like rolling with resistance. There's like a whole, like, I forget what the acronym is, but I remember rolling with resistance is one of them. So you don't want to like fight somebody. You don't want to judge them. You don't want to argue with them. And supporting self-efficacy and like, you know, like really not wanting people to like lose confidence in themselves and reflectively listen in spaces with folks. So that's like a really effective strategy, which is more like talky, like it's like action oriented to a point. I think even like cognitive behavioral therapy is supposed to be helpful as well. I've never used it in that way. But and then like there's medication that also helps. There's I can't remember what it's called, but there's one, at least like with alcoholism, there's one where you like take this medication and then if you do drink, it makes you like violently ill.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then like for other substances, there's like methadone and Suboxone and things like that where, you know, if people are treating like opioid addiction, that these are things to help wean them off of opioids.
Never knew. That's fantastic. I mean, truly, just the resources that we have available, guys. This is why you listen to get these resources, to get these gems of information. That was my last question for you. Brian, do you have any questions?
Sure. I do.
Is it what's my astrological profile?
Yes. No, my question actually is, this movie does a lot of characters explain things and other characters do it even though it's been explained to them. For instance, the Cate Blanchett character says, like, my job is to figure out their fears and sell it back to them. And she figured out his fear was alcohol because of his dad, and she sells it back to him. You know, like that's what he does. There's a ton of that in this. And the geek, he explains to him exactly what a geek is. And at the end, he's still in a place where like he just accepts the level that he's gone down. Jamie, how broken, or not broken, maybe that's a bad word usage, but like what kind of mindset do you need to be in to consent to something like to becoming the geek or something like that when you very much well know what it is, like that rock bottom, like can you talk a little bit about that mindset?
I mean, I think it's super hard because like, yeah, like, I mean, part of addiction is the dependence that we have on it. And like, you know, what are you willing to go through? Because like you're psychologically dependent, you're physically dependent. I think that I think it's really difficult to talk about, but I mean, also as a side note, like with alcoholism, like withdrawal can kill you. So like literally, like if he is at that point where like he needs it that badly, then the things that he's willing to do, you know, he'll do in order to get it. But like, I think, I don't know, I have a hard time talking about like rock bottom because I have kind of like mixed feelings on that idea. But I think that like, you know, the power that like drugs and substances can have on us is so great that we might be not necessarily willing, but like feel like we have to adjust our values and like fundamental ideas about ourselves in order to like meet this need because of dependence. And so that's I don't know if that's like any kind of helpful explanation.
No, let me reframe my question. Knowing what we know about
alcoholism and being in that stage and withdrawal and what they told us in the movie about a geek, do you believe that Bradley Cooper Stan at that moment at the end of that movie was in a place to just accept being the geek? Do you think that the movie had gone far enough to show us what a rabbit hole he had fallen down in terms of alcoholism, in a place to accept it at the end?
I mean, yes and no. I think that they showed us his peak, like the height of what he was doing, and also the riskiest thing that he had done. But like it also intersected with like him operating at his like highest point. And I think that like them introducing the alcohol at the point that they did, plus the loss of the only other person who could have like helped him. Like, I wonder if it would have looked differently if he wasn't alone. And if what's her face? If Rooney Mara's character had stuck around, would this still have happened in this way? Sure. I think that there's something to like him being alone, even though he, you know, might still have these skills as a mentalist. I think so much was riding on having her, because like that act was like a duo act. And so like, right. I think they're trying to show that he lost everything. He lost his, you know, like his partner, he lost his, multiple partners, I guess, if Cate Blanchett was like also kind of his partner in a different way. And just like had his faith broken by her. But like there's the in between of like, oh, all of a sudden he's just like homeless and an alcoholic, and like whatever else happened in that in between time where he grew that really grizzly beard. Sure. But I guess like we are to assume that, you know, he did hit so-called rock bottom, because I don't think that he would have ever wanted to return to the carnival. Like, I think that like part of that journey was like him leaving and being like, we're too good for this. We're never coming back. And so like for him to actually return, I think also was supposed to like kind of be meaning, like not just the fact that he becomes the geek, but just the fact that he even like ends up back there after like leaving everyone.
With his radio in the background there and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I have one more question for Nikisha. They talk a lot about ego in this movie, and ego is definitely in between the lines in a lot of scenes and pieces. And obviously as a performer, you need to have some sort of an ego. Can you talk about like what kind of balance is needed? Because if you are a performer, you do need an ego. It does give you some sort of confidence. It keeps you from, you know, I don't know, getting too much in your head potentially. I guess what's the balance that you find or that you see other people have? And I'll kind of leave that open-ended. I won't absolutely. I actually will.
Yes. And I definitely will just start by saying this. I will speak on my own perspective and my own behalf as an actor, because everyone is different and everyone is dealing with stuff differently mentally, to where that balance would look different on other people. So for me in particular, I think that it kind of coincides with the movie of the consequences of it all. There's no way for you to have such an extreme ego that things won't go south. And I think we've seen that in real life with actors and with political figures or people who are in the forefront, who need that sense of ego, like you said, because you do need to have a little bit of it so that you can have the confidence to go out and be on stage or be in front of people or do the things, you know, that you need to do to whatever the thing is. And so I think just personally for me, having the sense of ego only goes so far as to make sure you're doing the best job that you can, the job that you are getting paid to do. And anything else beyond that ego is just a setup for disaster, whether it be you losing relationships within the business or losing relationships within your personal life. And I think it's a sense of groundedness that is needed in order to find the balance. So whatever keeps you as the individual grounded in your own reality and your own purpose in life can be a helpful tool to not go to that extreme, which again is what the movie is describing in a sense of he had so much power and he had this ability and he took it to the extreme to where he gained all of this power and then it overtook him and he suffered the consequences for that. And so with power comes great responsibility. Where is that from? I know that's like a regular like phrase, but isn't that from the specific movie?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man?
Oh, see, terrible at that. I love Spider-Man. I mean, Tobey Maguire is my guy because I am a 90s baby. But yes, he will always be my Spider-Man. I'm just going to say that.
That's okay. You're that thought is welcomed here.
Yes. Great. So yeah, it's just a matter of consequences and whatever, lets you sleep at night. So you can't act an ass all the time and expect everyone to just fall at your feet. You gotta have some accountability, and some trustworthiness and some sense of self and a sense of selflessness.
Sure.
In order to be able to be good at this business, because as you can see, the people who are the nicer, the people who let their egos go are the ones that have the most success. I will point out Zendaya because she is my hero and she is fantastic. Sure. Example of someone who is an ultimate performer and does not have the ego that drives her into a sense of powerfulness that will be her demise.
Sure. Cool.
Fantastical.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yay. Woo. All right. So are we rating this thing? Are we rating the Rotten Tomato?
Yeah. Let's
do
Rotten Tomatoes.
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
Fantabulous.
All right. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm going to say a 75.
Okay. Jamie?
I'm going to say 68.
All right. This has an 80%.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
While it may not hit quite as hard as the original, Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley is a modern noir thriller with a pleasantly pulpy spin.
Pulpy? Okay.
Yeah. And then the audience score is a 68. So Jamie was very close to that.
Nice.
And the audience says, stylish but slow, Nightmare Alley pays off with a powerful ending if you can hang in long enough to make it, that is.
Truly, and well, I might be overgeneralizing, but it seems like any movie that is over the 2-hour mark is going to be a slow burn. But there might be other movies to dismiss my statement.
I think movies like this, you're right. Like there aren't big action sequences. Like a 2.5-hour movie, like with big action sequences, like may not be a slow burn because you're just getting these sequences. But like something like this, especially if it's a noir movie, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
Two things that I totally forgot about to mention before we go into the 4 S's. One is, I think I mentioned it briefly, but I really loved the last 20 minutes of this movie, like from the setting up the wife coming into the yard and to the end. I enjoyed I didn't mention this during the Kate Blanchett conversation at the very beginning. Here's the thing: we knew narratively that she was conning him. We knew that one of the twists of this movie was that she was not being totally truthful to him, because they set it up with the money. They set it up with like the tape recordings. They set it up with so much that like you knew something was going to happen. So to me, the twist wasn't that she was tricking him or conning him. To me, the twist was going to be why, and we never got the why. So it felt like an empty twist. That's what I meant. That's a better version of what I wanted to say earlier from my perspective.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
No, that makes sense.
And the last thing I'll say is I thought the use of fire in this movie was awesome. I thought that he freezes his dad and then burns his dad essentially. And then anytime somebody mentions the watch or his dad, they're lighting a cigar or a cigarette or a match or like there's an orange glow somewhere. Like that like always happens throughout the movie. And like it's kind of like that this like fire is burning up inside of him. There's like maybe a guilt there. There's maybe like that's his background. Like that the fire, like there's lighting a fire underneath him, and it's fine. It's one of these times it's gonna like totally burn him. I really liked that visual, that imagery, and just kind of that symbolism within the movie. I forget that's what I meant to say earlier.
Nice.
Nice.
Should we do the 4 S's?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Skull, scare, shakes, and suggestions. The talking horns, 4 S's.
Okay, the 4 S's are skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. We're going to rank them 1 through 10, except for suggestions. And we are going to see how we thought they pulled off each one of these categories. So let's start with skulls. So that's human behavior and mental health. Jamie, why don't you start with this? What would you give it between 1 and 10?
I'm going to give it a 4.5. I low score because Cate Blanchett is quite possibly the worst psychologist. I don't know. The guy from
I was going to say,
is
who's
pretty
worse?
bad.
Who's worse, Hypnotic guy or her?
I mean, I guess Hypnotic guy, but like by a smidgen. It's all just bad. But I do think that like the way that things unfolded and like the connection back to like parent, trauma and drama was like pretty realistic. So I'll give it that.
Nikisha, what are you thinking?
I'll round it up to a 5, only because, and this is like bare minimum, but just the fact of having any kind of mental health expert in the movie is, good for the skulls. So, of course, Cate Blanchett, nefarious tendencies. But I'll give it a 5.
Cool. I'm going to go with a 6. I think it's trying to do something more. I think it does it better than a lot of these movies that we've watched in terms of trying to say something about human behavior and health. And I think that would almost lean more into the human behavior in terms of ego, in terms of mentalists. Like there were TV shows like John Edwards, like crossing over with John Edwards. Like this is not like a surprising thing. He just like, he brought it to a whole nother level in terms of like being televised. So that human behavior element and even we didn't even talk about like Mary Steenburgen believing in everything he said and doing a murder suicide. Like,
yeah,
I think he was excellent at what he did and it had major consequences. So I would go, I would, the consequences that came from his actions were very believable in terms of human behavior.
Yeah.
For me. Okay, cool. Next up, scares. How scary was this movie? Jamie, Nikisha?
It was not scary.
Scary.
All right, so big fat
I appreciated
zeros.
the gore. I appreciated the gore with the running over the guard man scene.
Yeah.
And so I'll give it a 1. A 1.
I think it's 1s across the board. 1 for me as well.
Yes.
Especially when Mary shoots her husband and herself.
Totally.
That was probably the most shocking part.
Sure. So let's go with shakes. How much are you going to shake this movie off? Is this kind of forgettable? Will like the tone stick with you? Will performances? Will, Mary Steenburgen's murder-suicide thoughts? Numbers?
I give it a 3. because mostly because of the neo-noir-esque aspect of it. And I did like the development of Bradley Cooper's character in general, even though it's a really long movie, and I agree it's long for no reason. I would still give it a 3.
Sure. Jamie?
I think I will also give it a 3. I've been thinking about it a little bit, but it hasn't made me like it anymore. I've just been thinking about it. Yeah.
I'm going to give it a 4. I'm going to give it a 4 because I'll be grouping when someone asks about like Guillermo del Toro movies, like I've seen it, I'll be grouping it with the other Guillermo del Toro movies, talking about like how it ranks, things like that. So I'm going to go with a 4 just because it has that extra boost of like a famous director who's known for his like production design and tone.
Right.
So
sure.
I'll give it that. Okay. Suggestions. What would you group this with? What would you suggest in addition to watching this movie? Whomever wants to start.
I am terrible with suggestions, as we all know. But in watching this movie, I just want to say this. This is not my suggestion, but it reminded me of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Just a lot going on, but not going on. But the same kind of sense of we're on a journey. Obviously, if you know more about what was happening in that time period, then you're super invested in what's going on. But as far as, so I'm just saying that if you like those kinds of longer movies, then watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But you mentioned Crimson Peak, and I did not realize that was Guillermo del Toro. And maybe I did, I just forgot. But I thoroughly enjoyed the cinematography in that movie. So I will suggest Crimson Peak since this is a horror podcast.
Cool. Jamie?
I was thinking more about the spooky noir, and I am going with The Black Dahlia.
Cool.
I've never seen that.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Never
I mean,
heard of
it's very similar vibe. Do you know about like the actual murder?
No.
That was me trying to be suspenseful.
Murder. Yes.
It's based off of the real life. It's an unsolved murder mystery, I believe. Elizabeth Short was found mutilated in like the 1947.
Oh.
And her case became highly publicized due to the gruesome nature of the crime.
Was that one of those, the first time those kinds of gruesome pictures were put in the newspaper-esque moments? Do you know what I mean? Or maybe not.
That I don't know. Okay. I am not sure.
I just know there was a turning point in media where, because I think it was when I went to the Museum of Death in New Orleans. Either way,
cool.
I think that's it. That's what it is. But there is a turning point in our time where newspapers were just printing out the first photos of mutilated bodies, and I don't know. It seemed like that might have been probably part of that moment in time. But I'll check back in with that.
Cool.
Beauty. Brian, do you have suggestions?
Yeah, I'm a little torn. You can help me. You can help me with one. So one of the original like noir movies is Double Indemnity, from the 1940s. It's a classic. You know, it kind of fits into that aspect of things. It's with Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck. Basically, it's an insurance salesman, and he becomes involved with a married woman who's plotting her husband's murder for insurance purposes, and it's all like this, like it's like a noir movie, if that makes sense. And then the flip side of things is like maybe just watch Pan's Labyrinth if you want like top tier Guillermo del Toro. So
yeah, that sounds good.
I'll just say both of those, depending on what you're interested in. Like if you want a little bit more of that magical fantasy, but with the like layered characters, go for that. if you want something a little bit more like noir, black and white, heavy movie, I would go with Double Indemnity. Cool.
Beautiful. Well, I think that sums it up for our episode of Nightmare Alley. You can follow us on all the social medias, the Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Talk Horror Pod, POD. And Brian, where can they listen to us?
You can listen to us wherever you get podcasts, things like Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us there. 5 stars, please.
And thank you.
Thank you. I don't know why that's so funny.
That's how we're ending it. That's how we need to end it. Send in the clowns. We're done. We're in the circus.
I'm trying to make a clown nose sound. If you could do some clown nose sound.
That'd be great. Beautiful. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.